I think we are about there. See Journal Chronicle, see our 4 local TVs. So I think we're good. We'll give her just a second to get set up.
Hello, I'm Dan DeRose with 19 News, coming to you from our digital desk again. We're about to take you to a news conference being held by the Lorain Police Department, one of 3 school districts, communities that had to deal with what appear to be swatting incidents. That's a fairly new term. That's a term for these false alarms that get called into schools, whether they were jokes or false alarms. They get schools canceled. We had an issue at the Cleveland Arts and Social Sciences Academy today. We were told, quote, that it was closed for the safety and security of staff and scholars. We had the Lorain High School, where in fact we're about to hear this from police. They made contact with a 12-year-old that just after 7 a.m. this morning, she admitted to have been, the Lorain police were alerted by the FBI about a possible threat. When they made contact with the 12-year-old this morning, she said it was a joke. They went through and confirmed that she had no means of carrying out any kind of threat. And then last but not least, Clearview High School and the Durling Middle School. There was also a bomb threat that was also in Lorain County that saw schools closed there. And the question becomes, you know, what can be done to prevent that? We're going to have a discussion at about 1 o'clock with a Case Western Reserve University professor in this very area that does an immense amount of research into the psychology and what this does to students, staff, parents, what it does to disrupt the school day. But then conversely, you have to take these seriously because as we saw last week, what can happen when somebody makes threats, they are investigated, but then it can lead to a school shooting like we saw in Georgia. It appears we're just about ready to go in Lorain, so let's take you live there to a news conference to explain this morning's latest threat to the schools there.
Scratch it up. There we go. There you go. Nice. Yeah. I appreciate that. Yeah, all right. You guys want to give me a thumbs up if you're good? Yeah. All right. Everybody good? Carissa, you ready? All right. Okay, thank you everybody for coming. I'm Lieutenant Morris with the Lorain Police Department. I'm our public information officer. The reason we call it the press conference, it just seemed to make more sense to be able to do one press conference rather than 10 different interviews separately. We will give a chance for everybody to ask questions if there's certain things that we can answer. Obviously, it's a sensitive subject and it does deal with juveniles, so there's only so much that is available. However, I do appreciate you all taking the time to come so that we can get this all taken care of at one time and hopefully a lot more thoroughly than we would have if we were rushing from interview to interview. Before we get started, I would just like to introduce some of our guests as well. Dr. Jeff Graham, Superintendent, Lorain City Schools, is here. Our patrol captain, Captain Andrew Matthewson. Executive Director of Safety and Security for Lorain City Schools, Ruben Figueroa, is here. And Director of Communications, Krista Lockich. I hope I didn't butcher that too bad. Okay, all right. So thank you all for being here as well. I think this is a manifestation, again, of our partnership that we have, as well as the quick conclusion to this investigation as well. That's also something that was made possible by the collaborative relationships that we have, the healthy relationships that we have with Lorain City Schools and obviously interdepartmentally. So just the reason you're all here, today at just after 4 a.m., we were alerted from our local FBI office that that they had been alerted to a threat to a school in our area, potentially in our area. What they did was forward us the information that they had and some of the precursory investigative information. Chief McCann actually received that amongst, as well as our captains. And immediately the investigative process began. We reached out almost immediately to Lorain City Schools. Again, Executive Director Figueroa and Dr. Graham were critical in our response to this. And as that began, we started the investigative process. Internally, our road patrol officers did a phenomenal job. They worked with our detective bureau and with our school resource officers to make sure that any information and any leads that we had at that time were followed up on immediately and thoroughly. This allowed us to take some active steps in bringing closure to this situation, identifying suspects, and trying to complete the investigation in a timely manner. We were in fact able to do that. Eventually, we were able to follow up and locate an address in Lorain and find a suspect that was a 12-year-old female who eventually would go on to admit that she did in fact create the post that alerted everyone to the potential threat. The suspect claimed that it was just a joke and that there was no actual threat that was being planned or no actual actions that were intended to be carried out. To go back a little bit, the actual post itself was that somebody was going to, quote, shoot up your school. Upon making interviews, or excuse me, upon locating the suspect and interviewing the family and the suspect, once that confession was obtained, officers ensured that the juvenile didn't have access to be able to carry out such a threat. The house was checked for any kind of firearms or access to firearms, as was the personal property and the person of the suspect. It was determined that she did not actually have the means to be able to carry out the threat, at least not readily available, at which time she was cited or issued a summons to appear in juvenile court for inducing panic. The threat, again, in abundance of caution and with discussion with the schools, the threat caused Lorain High to be closed for the day, as well as the administrative building. Again, there's no way to know how long this investigation would have taken. We were very fortunate that really in under 3 hours, this was closed. We had all of the actors that were believed to be involved, which is simply one, and there was the court process has begun so that any kind of resources or accountability will be handled through those means. But again, when you don't know how long the investigation is going to take, you're forced to make kind of a split-second decision, and you weigh out your options. I think our schools did a phenomenal job in prioritizing the safety of our students and our staff, and really, you know, a decision that they don't take lightly, I know, to close the building. But like I said, we're proud of our partnerships that we have with them. We're proud to be able to say that upon getting this information, upon our FBI alerting us to what was potentially a threatening situation, or what was a threatening situation, we were able to follow this up and bring it to closure. Hopefully this press conference will help bring light to the fact that these are not taken lightly. These threats are taken very seriously. I think in this day and age we have to, and we're glad to know that this student didn't have the means, but hopefully this serves to convey the message to our community, to our students, to our families, that this is very serious. This is not a joking matter, and that we don't and our schools don't take this lightly. So with that being said, are there any questions from any of the members here today, the media? Yes, ma'am?
Yeah, so Vivian is here from Channel 3. I just have a few questions. Can you just talk to us a little bit about what is the actual protocol? I'm hearing that there were a lot of hands involved. The FBI alerted you all, and you all went right into investigation. When we typically see threats like this, can you talk to us a little bit about the protocol?
So yeah, when we see threats like this, and a little bit of that is dependent on the severity of the threats, the specificity of the threats, right? This one was somewhat general, but in the same respect, we take every one of these threats seriously. We like to start from that perspective and then hopefully be surprised by the fact that it maybe was apparently a joke or was apparently something that wasn't meant to be taken seriously. But again, we take every one of these threats seriously. What that really entails is us, alerting our schools, our partners at the schools. Again, it's that healthy communication to where we can actually pick up the phone and get a hold of anybody from the top to the middle, to wherever we need to go, we can pick up the phone and contact anybody and be talking, voice to voice, rather than have to worry about emails and things. You have to remember this was something that really began at just after 4 o'clock in the morning. So even a lot of our school, members, may not have started their day quite yet. Some of them may have, but the idea is that, our opportunity to begin collaborating with them and just working with them to try to find out where this is going to begin and what exactly we have. Then we start to look at some of the leads that we do have that we're able to follow up on. In this case, we had some information from the FBI, some addresses and some possible locations of where this text originated from. So, yeah.
For clarification, I just have one follow-up. So for clarification, in these sorts of incidents, it is normal to bring in the FBI and other partners, depending on the severity. This is the normal protocol for it.
Well, so in this case, it originated from the FBI.
Okay.
Okay. There are times when we can bring in the FBI because it originated from us. So it really, I know it's not a great answer to your question, but it really is dependent on each situation, how it originates, who we bring in. So for the most part, we're going to start to follow up on leads immediately.
And just to follow up on that, with this protocol, was this heightened at all because of what we saw last week in Georgia?
It's not heightened because of what we saw last week in Georgia. We react to these in the same way that we always would, that we take them seriously until there's a reason to believe that it's not going to occur. And I think that, I don't want to speak for the schools, but I think that's another, you have to, in this day and age, and really even before this day and age, you have to take this seriously, and you have to believe that aside from any kind of action taken or any investigative work or work together, collaboration, that something bad is going to occur, and you have to react accordingly.
Lieutenant Morris, just on this becoming a startling trend, I think there's multiple schools across Northeast Ohio over the last 24 hours that have had a similar experience, a similar threat that's happened after Georgia last week, obviously. Just on that topic of it becoming a startling or concerning trend.
Yeah, I think that this is sadly not necessarily new, okay? The trends, to which you refer, these are things that we've been training on for several years now. I know here at the Lorain Police Department, and I know that the state of Ohio has offered training, for incidents such as this, how to recognize, how to prevent, how to deter. There's a lot of different things and approaches that have been taken to affect the problem or the trend, as you put it. Sadly, it's not necessarily new. I would venture to say that most law enforcement agencies have received some sort of training or at least have access to that training, whether it's from the state of Ohio, whether it's from the FBI, whether it's even local. But yeah, it is becoming something that more and more we're trying to affect the problem before it even exists. So we're trying to identify ways to offer services and outlets to students, that offer help to parents and things like that to prevent the behavior, I suppose, from even beginning.
Just on that, does kids think it's okay to do this and try to get it out on a day of school or a week of school, or is that the cause or why this 12-year-old pulled this prank, just to get out of school? Yeah,
so I don't know if there's any one specific cause. It really is situationally dependent. This student may have had a specific motive or a certain idea. Maybe this student perhaps thought it was just a joke, right? So a lot of this is kind of, really conveying that message that it's never a joke and that it's a big deal. And, we as adults tend to read things that happen in Georgia. Sometimes the young folks in our world here aren't quite as aware of some of the global or national trends, and they don't understand the gravity of what they're saying, or maybe even the consequence that could be attached to some of the posts that they make on social media or some of the things that they say out loud. But it certainly does spawn a response. And like I said, it's not just a police response, it's a community response, it's a school response, it's a response from all of our local institutions here that we all do take very seriously. And if there's anything that we can do to just convey, I guess, the gravity of these actions, our actions like this, whether it is to get out of a day of school, whether it is for just a joke, or whether it is, serious. We want to make sure that everyone is aware that there are consequences and accountability that becomes attached to these sorts of actions, and that it is going to generate a response. Actually, we had one question in the back.
Two quick questions. Do you
Sure.
know when the post was made?
So I don't have an exact date and time on the post because it did come through a few different channels. Like I said, the social media channel alerted to the FBI alerted us. So I don't know the specific date and time. I know our investigators do, I just don't have it at the press conference here.
And then two, you mentioned there's consequences, obviously, that comes along with these posts that some students might see as a joke. I know you can't talk specifically about this case in general, but overview, what would those consequences be if someone else is thinking, oh, I'm going to pull the same joke? What's the punishment there?
So, I mean, there are court punishments, right? There are punishments from the courts or the state, you know, if somebody is subsequently convicted of the act, right? The arrest in itself or the ticket or the summons in itself can be a consequence to a person. However, there are different consequences when coming from the courts, and whether that can range anywhere from services, you know, perhaps counseling, to actual, you know, punitive sanctions such as, you know, time in the DH and things like that. So there are a range of consequences for something like inducing panic, and it just depends.
Jake, what social media platform was it posted to?
So I believe it was Snapchat, but again, I am not 100% on the actual platform. I know it was social media, so yeah.
And I think this is for the superintendent. How disruptive is
Well, hold
this?
on a second, because I need to get him at the microphone if you're going to ask him a question for the
Are you
superintendent.
comfortable with that?
But I still have questions for the lieutenant guy.
Okay.
Okay. Excuse me. Does the 12-year-old have a juvie record?
No, we don't have any record from the student.
If you don't mind.
Are there any other questions for me? We'll turn it over. Just one, you know, grand thing.
You talked about this being, as it is, a startling trend and something that isn't new. And what further actions, if any, is the department taking to make sure that today's kids don't get desensitized to this? As crazy as that might seem, it is something that seems to be at least starting to happen, if not fully happening already.
Yeah, no, and that's a great question. I think, you know, this is part of, you know, the departmental response is to have a press conference to show that it is something taken serious by us, by our schools, and to be able to start to get that message out there. Hopefully parents see this on their news outlets, and they can start to have some conversations with their students. I know I certainly will have a conversation with mine. Not that I necessarily believe that, you know, that there's going to be a problem with that, but it's really truly, I think, a bigger picture. What you say and what you do online in the public, that can follow you, and that does have some sort of a consequence in one way or another. Sometimes it can be a formal consequence from our courts, but other times it's a consequence just in maybe not landing that job, or maybe, you know, not being, maybe being suspended. So it is going to be this is certainly the start of the departmental response, but I think that there will probably be some educational and outreach efforts conducted, again, in collaboration with our schools, who you know, obviously have the audience that we want to reach, to be able to really work together, maybe to do something to again, try to affect this problem before it even exists.
Last one for you, if I can. Just the strain that this creates on law enforcement, parents, educators, you know, and this, because it is taken so seriously.
Yeah, so it does create a strain. You know, we all came in today, you know, before our day even started, we were called, and we got to the station to try to do as much as we could, you know, potentially before school started. You know, you're working on a clock, and there's not a lot of room for error. Had this been, you know, something where somebody was actually planning on carrying something out, we would have been in a really difficult position. And, you know, time is certainly of the essence, and the stakes are certainly high. So it does place an immense amount of strain on the department and on our school officials, who are also working on, you know, being able to deliver the curriculum that they expect to be able to deliver.
Hey, Jay.
Yes,
Does
ma'am.
this have any connection with the closure at Clearview?
Not to our knowledge at this time. We don't find any connection between this and any other school threats. Okay.
Is she a student in Lorain schools?
I believe she is, so she may face discipline, but I don't believe she's a student at the high school.
Why is Clearview closed?
I do not know. So at this time, I'll invite Dr. Graham up. Try not to break anybody's microphones.
Oh, appreciate it, thanks. And I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
Sure. How disruptive is this for the school staff, students, parents? I mean, not only during the day, but just the emotional, sending your children to school.
Yeah, panic is the word for it. It's terrorizing. And part of what adds to that panic and the stress is the fact that, and again, what happened this morning, I was talking to Chief McCann, phenomenal job from the word go, but he had a lot of moving parts. He's talking to a bunch of different agencies, a bunch of different groups, a bunch of different people, coordinating things behind the scenes, giving me some tasks to do to get back to him. But again, it was the team that, the partnership that we have was amazing. So as Lieutenant Morris mentioned, as a result of that, it was over, beginning and ended in 3 hours. But 3 hours is a long time, especially when we closed school. And the reason we closed one school, just the high school, not the others, is because it opened to the soonest. And there were still a couple questions we didn't have answers to. So out of abundance of caution and to make sure that safety was first and foremost, I canceled at the high school to make sure we had time to get the answers to those follow-up questions. And then once we did, then we could say, okay, we're safe. And then we have to gather the information. The police department has to finish their investigation. And until they do that, we can't do anything, because the last thing we want to do is interfere with their investigation or miscommunicate. So we have to make sure we have, so during those couple of hours, stress just keeps building. So again, it becomes, it has a life of its own in the community, and that adrenaline rush doesn't just drop off and things go back to normal. We had a lot of students call off in other schools just because of the fear of what might be, because we have far too many examples of how horrific these events can be and how real they are.
The 12-year-old, what grade is she in the district?
I don't know, but she is our student.
Are extracurricular activities canceled for the rest of the day? Football practice?
They are not. They are not.
Doctor, can you just talk to us a little
Sure.
bit about how you're feeling? I mean, I think, again, these incidents are serious, and we're coming off the cuffs of just what happened last week. School just started. It's only September. I mean, can you just talk to us a little bit about the temperature and how you all are feeling at the district?
And I think, like I said, the temperature is one of, actually, we had one of the best starts of the school year. I've been a superintendent for 20 years. This year, we had a great feel in our buildings, calm, peace, happiness, children, adults, everyone. And an event like this brings that to a screeching halt. And it's not just because of the statement that was made, it's the process that follows and how we react to it, because, again, it is so real. And we can't take it for granted. And I appreciate the police department's approach because we have to assume it's serious until it's proven not to be. But, again, during that time that they're demonstrating and we're proving it not to be, it's incredibly stressful for everybody. So our job now is to keep people calm, let folks know they are safe. And if there's a good thing that comes out of this, it's the fact that everyone behaved as they were trained to behave. From the police department to our safety and security, everybody did the right thing. And as a result, again, 3 hours is a long time, but to conduct an investigation throughout a city, it's pretty quick. And as a result, things can resume to some sense of normalcy a whole lot sooner. But again, it's based purely on the competence of the folks to my right and the relationships that we have.
And when you say normalcy, do we expect Lorain High School to be back open?
Yes. The only reason it was canceled today is because we weren't 100% sure that everybody was safe.
Why is Clearview closed?
I do not know.
Oh.
Yeah.
The word you used was surreal, and so I kind of want to get into your brain for
Sure.
a second. When and how did you first receive this sort of alert, and what was your immediate reaction? I'm curious.
Chief McCann called me about 5 o'clock in the morning and shared it with me. And my immediate response was, all right, what do we do? So again, we've got a playbook. We've got ways to behave. We're trained to behave in a way so there is no panic on anybody's part. The question is, what do we know, what do you need, and what are the next steps? And then we engage the proper people. But again, it's frustrating for those folks who are waiting. But
How do educators as a whole get ahead of this issue? Obviously, there's a lot of instances of this happening right now.
Yeah.
Is it a blend of educators maybe having a school assembly talking about this, or is it getting parents on board? Because it's just far too common.
far too common, but the number one solution is healthy relationships between students, between adults and students, because more times than not, the students will tell us what's going on, and we can react well ahead of time. Sometimes it's the FBI because there's a trigger and a filter somewhere. We also have those in our devices. We have one-to-one devices, but because they're ours, information is filtered. And threats like this, we're notified on. So we do follow-up calls. And again, work with the police department to make sure that we're following up and taking every one of those seriously.
Will this student face any discipline within the school outside of the charges in juvenile court?
I can't speak to that yet, but let me explain why. We haven't seen the student since all this came out. She's off today. She stayed at home. Again, all this took place about 7 o'clock in the morning. But what happens on our end, we do have policies and procedures that we do follow. We do take this very seriously, but it all starts with due process. We have to listen to the child, listen to her family, and gather more information on not just what happened, but the what and whys behind why it happened.
Dan DeRose with 19 News as we wrap up the news conference in Lorain, because in just about 5 minutes we're going to continue this conversation with a professor from Case Western Reserve University who looks at this very thing. How do you keep this from becoming even more of a trend? We have seen statistics that are eye-popping, a more than 500% increase in what's known as false reports or swatting. 500% increase from the 2018-19 school year into what we just went through in the last school year. You have to take it serious. We saw that in Georgia. But is there a way to take it serious and stop some of these false reports that cancel school that you heard from the superintendent right there says it definitely induces panic right away among parents and families and how they're going to handle that day. So tune in just about 5 minutes. You'll get a push alert from Channel 19 from the app, and we'll have that conversation. Until then, I'm Dan DeRose with 19 News. Have a good day.
19 News is everywhere. Download our CT